I'm Carys.
And I'm Nadine White.
Every week, Gary and I usually talk about those stories in the news that are overreported and the ones that are going completely under the radar and not being talked about enough. Today, I have a very special co-host, as you just heard. It is the journalist, author, publisher, filmmaker, and the UK's first ever race correspondent and member of the Over Under WhatsApp crew, Nadine White.
Hi. Thank you. Hi, Carys. This is Over the Top, Under the Radar.
Oh, I'm so excited you could guest star, Nadine. This is very exciting for me. Obviously, Gary, we miss you. But yeah, really glad that you had the time to join the pod.
Thank you. And yes, we miss you, Gary, but it's an honor to be on the podcast. I'm a big fan, as you both know. And been very excited in the days leading up to today. So thanks for having me.
And for those of you who don't know, Nadine is a brilliant journalist, filmmaker, many things. Gary and I are both big fans of her because, I feel like you're one of the main journalists in the UK who actually uncovers news stories and sort of really digs and investigates and surfaces stuff that hasn't been heard of. So yeah, I don't know, how did you end up getting into journalism?
Oh, well, thanks for saying that, Carys. Yeah, it's been a journey. I was thinking about it the other day, and I've been in journalism for around 13 years. So the time's flown. Started out in broadcast as a production assistant at a local radio station in Brixton called Play Vibes, internet radio station. Worked at Choice FM, which is known for being,
big name.
One of the UK's leading Black-run radio stations. It was rebranded to Capital Extra back in 2013. But yeah, really cut my journalistic teeth, as it were, through my role as producer of the official reggae chart show at Choice FM. And from there, writing for various online and local outlets. Been a journey, but yeah, I've always been dedicated to highlighting important stories, serving the general public through news. I think news should be for everyone. I feel very strongly about the importance of amplifying marginalized perspectives and helping to place them where they should be, which is at the forefront of the news agenda.
Also forgot to say, very importantly, you are a fellow South Londoner, and that is something that we bonded over a while ago. Yeah, represent. So happy. I'm so happy we're all South London now on the podcast this week. This is important. So how's your week been, other than getting excited to the podcast? Been up to anything fun?
Getting ready for my mum's birthday on Sunday, and also very important, love Mumsy, big up Mumsy, and Easter. I am of Jamaican heritage, and when it comes to Easter, it's all about, or partly about, of course, not all about, the purchasing of bun and cheese and frying your fish and hardo breads. It's been
so wait, what is the Jamaican spread for Easter then?
So your escovitch fish, which is a specific way of frying fish and garnishing fish. And typically we go for parrotfish or bream or snapper. I'm not too big on fried fish myself. I prefer a nice bit of salmon, actually. That's my favourite fish. So I'll be getting a few pieces. Salmon. Yeah, I love a bit of salmon. But yeah, hardo bread is part of the spread as well.
The classic.
White rice or rice and peas to go with the fish. And bun and cheese, which is, more of a treat than savoury dish. But those are the staples in a Jamaican household.
I'm hungry already. Okay. And just for those who don't know, Nadine has an amazing film that's already out called Barrel Children, about the families that were left behind by Windrush, which I think, can you stream it or watch it online?
So at the moment, I'm preparing to tour with the film, the third round of touring with the film. It's performed exceptionally well since it was premiered in June 2023, coinciding with Windrush 75, the 75th anniversary of HMT Empire Windrush's arrival in Britain in 1948. So yeah, it debuted among the top films at the UK box office chart, which is, fantastic, particularly for a self-produced, self-funded endeavour that took 7 long years to make. So it was a real journey. And since then, it's been shortlisted for a number of film festivals. Actually just got the news yesterday. It's been selected for the Caribbean Film Festival in Trinidad and Tobago. Yes. So I'll be going to Trinidad.
You get to go
in June. Yes, that's definitely part of the plan. But yeah, it's been a journey. So I have been touring with the film, took it to Jamaica last year. It's been to New Orleans. So there'll be some screening dates coming up this summer that I'll be announcing. So everyone who's interested in learning more, definitely follow me on social media where I'll be posting updates.
we've got a message from Joanna Ramiro, who has written in after I mentioned that I was feeling a bit down about the state of the world and was cheering myself up by reading negative things about Elon Musk. And so she has sent in about a new tool developed by the Democracy Collaborative called Tracking the Crisis. So she works for the Democracy Collaborative, but she's writing in a personal capacity. So Tracking the Crisis is a news aggregating tool that drops in your email inbox on Fridays, and it summarizes the events of the week in 2 chapters. So things that the US government and its allies are doing, and then acts and events of opposition, both institutional and grassroots. It's meant to respond to this idea that the right-wing sort of strategist Steve Bannon had about flooding the zones, who just feel overwhelmed. So if you do want to subscribe, you can go to trackingthecrisis.org. And Joanna says it is no match to Akatar, but she believes it can provide some relief in these overwhelming times. So thank you, Joanna. Appreciate that. Appreciate you. You can find us all over social media. We're on Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, and X. And our handle is @over_under_pod_. Big shout out to everyone who joined us on Patreon recently. Mike, Lena, Kirk, Dilip, Colleen, and Michael. Thank you so much. We have 486 Patreon supporters, of which 448 are fully fledged, paying Patreon supporters. Thank you so much.
The team make this podcast because they believe there's an audience out there of people just like us, people like you, who are being failed by the so-called mainstream media. That audience consists of people who are comfortable with unashamedly progressive perspectives and a sense of humour and irony.
Gary and I and the small black production company behind the podcast aren't all paid for what we do. Because our values matter to us, we also don't take random adverts. So we only accept sponsorship and support from organisations whose values align with ours. So it really is your contributions that keep this space alive.
If you enjoy the pod and find value in what we do, please consider donating. The packages start at just £5 plus VAT a month. And if you already donate, please consider upgrading your membership.
If you do donate, you'll get the podcast episode, a bonus episode, a weekly newsletter, and access to our exclusive Over Under WhatsApp community.
Search Over the Top Under the Radar on Patreon and put your money where your ears are.
This week, I want to talk about space travel and ChatGPT. How about you?
Well, I'm going to talk about the scandal Britain forgot, the educationally subnormal scandal, and the Birmingham Bin Crisis and what's being missed there. So I will kick off with my under the radar, which is the scandal that Britain forgot, the educationally subnormal scandal. So for those who aren't familiar, in 1960s and 70s Britain, hundreds of Black children, many of Caribbean heritage, were labelled as educationally subnormal and wrongly sent to schools for disabled children. So in many cases, parents were not aware that there were these new schools for so-called educationally subnormal. They'd moved from the Caribbean recently themselves, and certainly the parents had faith in the system and high hopes for their kids' education. So Black parents, teachers and activists, many of them resisted. That's, I do want to make that clear. They banded together and resisted this injustice, but it was pervasive. And as I say, at least hundreds of Black children of that generation were affected. So I wanted to cite a report that was published in 1967, which showed that the proportion of Black immigrant children, as they were described, in educationally subnormal schools was 28%, and about double that of those in mainstream schools, which stood at about 15%. And this report was published by the Inner London Education Authority. So there was this racist belief by, school leaders, teachers, those at the helm of power, that these Black children were intellectually inferior. And there was even a fear that was cited in one report that too many Black kids in class would depress white pupils. So that's the level of racism that we're talking about in relation to this incident. So some of the listeners will be familiar with Professor Gus John, trailblazer in terms of anti-racism and education. And he described this scandal as evidence of rampant racism. So the children, just to clarify the lead up to what happened, they were given culturally biased IQ tests by teachers that use language and vocabulary that many of the newly arrived Caribbean students were unfamiliar with. They failed these tests, and that was used as a justification for this warped racist notion that they were educationally subnormal, and hence they were sent to these schools. So it's a scandal. The ESN schools, many of them closed in the 1980s. If we look at the legacy of racism and discrimination and disparities in the education system today, we are witnessing in real time a situation where Black students are disproportionately excluded from school and placed in pupil referral units. So the legacy is there, it's strong, and it's something that isn't discussed in a meaningful way, and we're not seeing any real results being brought about as far as answers. It's a sad indictment on society that not everyone's familiar with the educationally subnormal scandal. There's a documentary that people can access, I think it's on BBC iPlayer now, called Subnormal. So for those who want to, please go ahead and check it out. But it's a live issue. Kim Johnson, the Labour MP, is calling for an inquiry, a government inquiry into the educationally subnormal scandal. And a group of survivors of this scandal are currently suing the government, and they're being represented by a law firm called Lead. So this is my under. I think it's something that should be discussed a lot more than it is being discussed. It's terrible.
Yeah, it definitely gone under my radar. And I mean, I know Lead are like a firm that often acts on behalf of the little guy. I think it's a good one to bring to listeners' attention because it's something that happened in the past, but we see continuing in British schools today. And it in some ways gives an explanation for a lot of the racism that Black and brown children experience when they're in school. I think you said it very well at the beginning, that idea that you, especially if you're not incredibly privileged, you defer to these institutions, be it like a doctor or a teacher, and you just assume they have your best interests at heart. And just extra heartbreaking that, young people who were sort of vulnerable and parents who were trusting were let down by the state. Was it something that happened all around the country, or was it in specific areas?
I believe that it was concentrated in London in particular, but it was a widespread issue that affected hundreds of kids. The exact number, as pointed out by Kim Johnson, the Labour MP who's calling for an inquiry, isn't widely known, which is why a government inquiry, would be so important.
Yeah, I think it's also I think we're very good in the UK at seeing racism and structural racism as something that happened in America or apartheid South Africa. There's a deliberate forgetting of our own history and the things that happened in the UK so that we can say racism is something that happens anywhere else. But I'm also thinking about Child Q, the regular stories we hear of schools policing Black hairstyles. I think it's obviously not happening in the same way today as this scandal, but that way that Black children in school are not treated the same as their white counterparts or are sort of subject to more policing, I think is something that's very real today.
Absolutely. And I think this selective amnesia, it speaks volumes, and it highlights, just whose lives and experiences and plight is viewed as important, and those who are, cast aside and forgotten.
And just for those who don't know, Child Q was a scandal that happened, I think it's 4 or 5 years ago now, of a young girl who was strip searched by police in school, humiliated, forced to take off her sanitary towel, all sorts of horrible stuff. And again, an example of a Black child that was just criminalized. I think the claim was that she had drugs on her. Obviously, none were found, but it was just, an example of the way that Black children aren't always allowed to be children.
There's a term that's been coined, the adultification of Black children, treating Black children as though they are adults. And as you said, Carys, not giving them space, not allowing them to actually be kids. So that is an issue that is rife in society. Again, it's something that's not discussed widely outside of cases that reach the mainstream news, like the Child Q case. The Child X case is another example of that as well, where a Black child was held at gunpoint by armed police after he was seen playing with a water pistol. So there are many examples like that. And I think outside of, as I say, instances where it reaches the press's attention and there's a bit of national conversation around it, there's a lack of consistent discussion about these issues. And so it goes under the radar for the most part. But as far as racism in schools, racist incidents have actually surged. There was a bit of reporting around that in recent months. And yet, when it comes to finding solutions to these issues, it seems that we're we're no way closer to establishing, a way forward. So it's bleak.
So my under the radar is a story that didn't get picked up much about a company that we do talk about a lot. So in the last week, ChatGPT, which is a generative AI tool made by the company OpenAI that I'm sure lots of people have used, became the most downloaded app globally in March. So the figures came out for app downloads on the Google Play Store and the Apple Store. And for the first time, ChatGPT was in the number one spot. So more people were downloading ChatGPT than like Instagram or TikTok. This is overall. I wanted to talk about this because I didn't see it picked up very widely, even though ChatGPT is something a lot of us are talking about, lots of us are using. It had a big update recently that allowed you to generate better images. You might have seen on social media, everyone making sort of dolls of themselves or Studio Ghibli type images. I think the interesting thing about this huge surge in downloads, so 46 million new downloads just in March, is that it shows how quickly this new technology, this generative AI that a lot of us are using, but not many of us really understand, has become mainstream. And I think we should be talking more about how many people are using ChatGPT, but also the company. It used to be a nonprofit, but it's becoming a company behind it, and whether we can trust it. So it's my under the radar because I feel like almost out of nowhere in the space of 2 years, this generative AI technology, ChatGPT, is becoming mainstream, almost like when people talk about searching something, they say they want to Google it. There were actually lots of different platforms that use the same technology, but ChatGPT is definitely the one most of us are familiar with. So it's my under the radar, everyone's using it. And I wanted to know, Nadine, because you're a journalist and a lot of journalists don't feel great about generative AI. Have you used ChatGPT? What do you think about it?
I have questions about ChatGPT. I don't use it, in terms of my writing. I'm old school. So, I take great pride in putting pen to paper and, doing my own writing. But I don't knock people who use it. It's not just an app at this point. It's become something of an infrastructure. People are using it for different reasons. People are using it to boost productivity. It does, for me, and I'm sure others would agree, raise questions about power, about access, about data, about what it means, for society. I'd love to know more about who's training AI, who's training ChatGPT, and whose values, moreover, are being baked into its code. So, yeah, two big question marks there.
Yeah, and I think you've raised a good point because the sort of technology that sits behind tools like ChatGPT are these large language models. So huge data sets that the AI is trained on that helps it to generate answers. Essentially, as far as I'm aware, the OpenAI one and a lot of the big, large language models have been trained using all of our data. So ChatGPT has been trained with other things that people have produced and put on the internet. And then it's sort of hoovered all of that up to train itself to be able to talk and interact with you. There are huge issues because the people building the models and the data they're using to absorb the models is often racist. I think with technology stuff, the genie's out of the bottle and you can't go back to a world where we didn't have ChatGPT. I don't think there's any question that ChatGPT is here to stay. But yeah, I think, a bit of an interesting one in terms of it's sort of free, but that's because we're the product.
Yeah, the horse has bolted for sure. As a comms guru, Carys, I'm interested to know what your personal interaction is with ChatGPT.
I was really anti-ChatGPT. I used to work at Mozilla, where there was a big focus on trustworthy AI and a lot of skepticism about the big AI tools and whether they could serve humanity because they were made by the same tech companies that have created a lot of harm. So for a long time, I just didn't even use it. I was like, I'm not messing with that. I have since. I've got a lot of friends who use it for work. Some of them work in comms, some don't. It kind of reminds me of like a posh public school boy because it has all the answers, but it's also confidently wrong. So you have to know what you're talking about to then know to call it out. So I do worry about people just like outsourcing to ChatGPT or thinking ChatGPT can do it all. I think it's like a little helpful buddy or something. Interestingly, so my brother's a software developer and he uses ChatGPT like a lot of engineers do. He chats to it. He's also from South London. He will call it fam or like cuz or bruv. He'll be like, fam, what are you doing? That's wrong. And ChatGPT now talks back to him like he's a roadman. So there you go. You can train ChatGPT to be from South London.
For my over the top, I want to talk about the Birmingham Bin Crisis, not because I think it has been over-reported on as an issue, because it's very important, but I think that there has been a simplistic approach to coverage in some cases that has left readers having more questions than answers. So there's a strike in Birmingham at the moment where refuse workers, bin workers, people who collect rubbish have gone on strike over proposed pay cuts. Consequently, as you can imagine, bins are piling up. There have been reports of, rats being seen, the size of cats. But ultimately, this is an issue of workers fighting for fair pay. When workers fight for fair pay, the press reaches for shock stories and stink. But in Birmingham, this strike is about more than just bins. It's about broken systems, and it's about who gets to live and work with dignity. It's about structural issues. And that's the real mess, I think. Separate and aside from the bins piling up, of course, it's an issue, but that is an underlying aspect of the story that I don't think is being covered in enough detail. That's an element of the mess, and who's going to clean that mess up. So I feel like the media has largely been focused on rats and rubbish, which, as I say, is important, but power, pay and politics is equally important here. And there are a few key questions that I have, and I know many others have, based on conversations that I've had. For example, there's a mismatch. So who's telling the truth as far as the numbers, the figures? So the Birmingham City Council says that 14 workers, and even that number varies, but, a few workers, 14's been cited, 12 has also been cited in some reports, stand to be affected by these cuts of up to £6,000. But Unite, the union representing the workers on strike, say 200 workers. And I've seen reports citing 150 workers stand to be affected with up to £8,000 worth of cuts. So there's a disparity there. There's a big discrepancy. And I don't think enough people within the media space seem to be asking the right follow-up questions. Where's the scrutiny around the numbers? What the exact numbers are, what the figures are. Has enough pressure been applied on the council and Labour to clarify? That's pretty basic information.
And is this going to be cuts to pay or like job losses or?
Cuts to pay, and some people are concerned about job security as well. So I think that some more information needs to be offered up around the exact numbers of those affected and the cuts at hand. And at the moment, I'm just seeing different figures being cited.
I think you're touching on a bigger theme as well, which is how the British media tends to cover strikes. And it's very much from a sort of how dare workers strike? This is the inconvenience it's causing people, rather than like why are people choosing to not get paid? Because when you strike, you do not get paid. Why are people so frustrated or concerned that they're willing to not be paid and like withdraw their labour entirely? And I would guess that if you work collecting bins as a refuse worker in Birmingham, you're not earning like massive amounts of money. You're not like on the big bucks. So if you've chosen to not get paid and be on strike, presumably there's a good reason, but it sounds like that's not the question being asked. It's more just, how dare our bins not be collected?
You're right to raise those points. I'm uncomfortable with the way in which these workers have been vilified in sections of the press as well. I was listening to one segment where the workers were described by one commentator as selfish. Some of that rhetoric has been bandied about. At the end of the day, these workers do, a vital work, vital jobs. They were key workers during the pandemic. Their duties are hazardous. There are very real health and safety risks that they face. And now they face cuts that leave some near minimum wage, even at risk of homelessness in some cases. So it's important for the media to delve into the real life impact of these strikes, not just on those whose bins aren't being collected, and that is of grave concern, but also the experiences and the plight of those who feel that they have no option but to strike and to draw a line.
Yeah, it also just, there's something about it doesn't fully match the sniff test of that concept of people being selfish for going on strike. A lot of strikes, I don't know about this one, but a lot of strikes are about safety concerns. And certainly a lot of the rail strikes that we've seen, or some of the strikes we saw in the NHS, were people, yes, saying our pay and conditions aren't good, but also the cuts you're making will make things less safe for everyone. They're the ones, often the canary down the mine, saying like, this isn't working. This company, this employer is doing something that could be dangerous for you or could like jeopardize the service we provide.
The government secured support from the army while this strike is ongoing, according to news reports. And it's worth clarifying that soldiers are not, reportedly, they're not being deployed to pick up rubbish, but a small number of office-based planners from the army, as I understand it, will provide logistical support. But I'm wondering about the costs. Presumably that'll be coming from central government, and then couldn't that same money go towards, securing a better package or paying the workers? There are questions around the army's involvement and costs, and whether temporary workers would be brought in to deal with the administrative chaos that could, be coming about as a result. So then are they going to have to spend money anyway between the council and between the government?
Yeah, so like another false economy. I think it's a great example as well of like work that working class people do that is important and vital, and that like most people don't want to do. People don't want to take out their own bins. People don't want to be dealing with rats and chaos. And I mean, I can't speak for Birmingham, but there's a lot of wahala in the London bin system. I'm recording this from my mum's place, and like the politics around Lambeth bin collection, who's putting what in their bin, it's a madness in this borough alone, and also the borough that I live in. So it's just like, this is really important work that none of us want to do. I don't want to be touching bins. I don't want to be dealing with rats. I think the people who do that stuff, they should be well paid. Like,
absolutely well paid. Need to put some respect on their name.
Yeah, fully put respect on their name, because I don't want to be dealing with rats.
For me, the coverage is missing for the most part. I won't say across the board, but for the most part, more scrutiny around how it is that the Birmingham City Council came to be bankrupt in the first place, because their bankruptcy and financial situation is being cited heavily, but delving into the reasons why the Oracle IT system implementation and how expensive that has been, austerity, cost of living crisis,
like bigger mismanagement questions.
Exactly, rising costs and reduced income for the council.
Do you think part of that lack of scrutiny is because most journalists are based in London or from London? Like, do you think that it means that there's less good reporting? Or
I definitely think that news has a tendency to be quite London-centric in its approach. So, I've no doubt that may have something to do with it, depending on which outlet you're referring to, I suppose, which news platform you're referring to. I think there are a number of different reasons why the right questions might not be being asked and why proper scrutiny isn't being applied here.
Bins is also a bit of a British obsession. Like the Daily Mail had a campaign about wheelie bins once. I'm a bit older than you, Nadine, so this was like back in 2009, so that like shows the difference in age. Yeah. The Daily Mail ran a campaign to stop monstrous wheelie bins engulfing our streets.
Oh, when was this? What year?
2009. It's a while ago. You were probably still in school. Yeah, there was
11.
Yeah, oh wow. Just like GCSE kind of days. It does say something about the Daily Mail, maybe even Britain, that like there will be a campaign against wheelie bins, but not a campaign to support bin workers. My over the top of this week, I think you'll have heard about it or you've seen it on social media. It's the Blue Origin space flight. So for those of you who haven't heard, Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, like most billionaires, is obsessed with space. His space company is called Blue Origin. And this week, Blue Origin had an all-woman space flight. So 6 women flew into space for 11 minutes. The 6 women included the singer Katy Perry, Jeff Bezos' fiancée, Lauren Sanchez, and TV presenter Gayle King, who I love because she's Oprah's best friend and because, honestly, you need to look up the memes. She looked the least keen to be going on the flight and the most happy to be back on Earth. She looked very unbothered by the whole thing. So I'm not saying this isn't newsworthy at all, Personally, I think billionaires get too much free press coverage. And I think it's kind of weird how into space travel the billionaires are. And we should be more looking into why they're all obsessed with space, especially when Jeff Bezos doesn't pay taxes or treat people well on planet Earth. So I think it's concerning. But the main thing I'm just struggling with is I think too much coverage. And then there's sort of two types of coverage. One that is just, this is record breaking and amazing and so exciting. And then the other end of the spectrum is people being like, this is the death of feminism. Now, I don't know about you, but I do not consider Katy Perry to be a representative of feminism. Quite the opposite. And like, it's great there was an all-woman space crew. I think it's sort of a par on feminist to suggest that this space flight has anything to do with like us or our politics. So yeah, I'm sort of struggling with just the amount of press coverage for a billionaire's vanity project. There's a lot of other stuff we could be talking about with Jeff Bezos. There's rumors he's going to be allowed to buy TikTok. Don't like that idea. He doesn't pay his taxes. He barely gives money to charity. I don't want to see his weird sort of like, it's a bit phallic as well, like space project. And then, yeah, I just think I like Gayle King. I won't hear a word said against her, but Katy Perry does not represent feminism or indeed womankind. So yeah, that's my over the top. I think too much about the space. And also we cannot allow this space flight to represent feminism.
I must say that I saw an article about this billionaire vanity project and I skim read it. Since then, I've seen memes and I've seen more coverage, quite a lot of coverage around it. And I just thought to myself, I couldn't give a monkey. I couldn't give a toss. I don't care. There's people on the breadline. There's all sorts going on in society. You know, it's the Birmingham crisis. There's a lot going on.
Rats the size of cats.
Rats the size of cats. And it just didn't speak to me as an important news item. And when I think about feminism, I don't hold Katy Perry as, you know, a feminist icon.
But also, if you got offered, if like Jeff was doing another flight or Elon and they were like, you can have a free spot, would you go?
I doubt it. I think just the concept of going into space, for me, it's not appealing. I wouldn't knock someone else for jumping at the opportunity, but it wouldn't be my idea of a good time, really. What about you?
I don't know. Like, no, because I don't think we should encourage the billionaires. I'm not going to knock Gayle King for going just because I like Gayle King. She's my girl. She did look like she regretted it. Okay, is there any freebie that you would take from a billionaire? That's what I want to know.
No, because I mean, nothing jumps to mind. My thing is, what conditions come with that, spoken or unspoken?
You're right. It's actually free.
Do you see what I mean? I mean, as I say, to each his or her own or their own. But nothing jumps to mind. Maybe a lifetime supply of free flights to Jamaica because the prices to go Jamaica are crazy.
Okay, there we go.
And it's just creeping up every year. And
Richard Branson come through. Does Virgin? Well, it must fly there.
Absolutely, yeah. Virgin flies to Montego Bay.
Yeah. Do you get offered a lot of free stuff as a journalist?
Yeah, from time to time, from experiences, you know, like trips. But the understanding there is that you're going to write about, you know, that experience or that press trips. It's perhaps not classed as a freebie as such, but, you know, items, gifts, things like that.
How do you decide? Is there stuff where you're like, I'm not going to touch this, that doesn't feel right?
By and large, I think it depends on which platform you work for and what the terms and conditions are as far as your contract, what rules you need to subscribe to. But for me, it tends to be a conversation that's had between myself and editor or senior colleague, and also who the offering is coming from as far as the gift or the experience, and then you make a decision from there. But more often than not, I don't tend to take gifts. I'm here to hold power to account, hold the government's feet to fire,
your reporting doesn't scream freebies. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, and it doesn't, no, I mean, I think it's a good question. It doesn't, the kind of reporting that I do doesn't exactly put me at the top of folks' Christmas cards list, depending on who you're talking to. And that's all right with me because I sleep at night, so...
Thank you for listening to Over the Top and Under the Radar. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to support the show, you can find us by searching Over the Top, Under the Radar on the Patreon website.
You can sign up to our newsletter at overunderpod.com and connect with us on socials at over_under_pod_.
And we're going to be at the podcast show live. So that's an in-person event on May the 20th. And we would love you to join us. You can get more info in our newsletter or online at thepodcastshowlondon.com. I will see you next week when Gary will return, and we unfortunately will not have Nadine, but thank you so much for joining us. You've been an amazing guest host. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me, and I will be listening to the podcast as always. Keep up the great work, Carys, Gary and team. And yes, Over the Top, Under the Radar podcast is amazing.